what is God, for me, is my idea of consciousness. God is not a thing, something you can necessarily see. It is within everything and outside of everything. So I believe that God, the absolute, whatever you want to call it, the self, is unchanging, is therefore pretty much everything I'm seeing has an element of God, but you couldn't call it God because everything changes. You, me, where we're sitting, this river, this planet has a life cycle, birth, death. But my feeling about God is that it exists beyond that, beyond those laws of nature. It was somehow, it is somehow separate to the laws of time, matter, space. And that's about as close as I've come to any realization of what God is.
So you don't see God as a bearded chap up in the sky telling us to be good, and if we don't, we'll go to hell, and if we are, we'll come to heaven?
I don't see God as a bearded chap, although I used to for many years. I was brought up in a Church of England family, went to Sunday school. My father's quite religious. He wasn't until he was about 26, I believe, maybe 28, and he went to a Billy Graham crusade and was converted with my mum. My mum did the usual thing, which is after about 6 months started to, wean off it a little bit. My father never did, and is incredibly religious and goes to church every week, and in fact has done almost sort of missionary work after he retired as an accountant. So I was brought up with a very strict Protestant view of what God is and our place next to God. And that consisted of some deity, a guy with a beard, telling us what to do, marking us on our behaviour, and hopefully granting us entrance into heaven. I think around about 14 or 15 was when I started to kind of, and I by the way, I fully bought it. I would say I was a born-again Christian. And I remember at the time, in fact, someone saying to me, most of you who are here at church, by the time you're 21, 22, will fall away from this. And it's a sad fact, but very few will stay on that narrow path. And I remember thinking, there's no way I'll be one of those. There's no way. I'm not going to fall away. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be one of those. And I have. But funnily enough, I probably feel like the path to discovering why we're here, who we are, what it's all about, is truly a narrow path. I don't think many people follow it. But around 14 or 15 was when I thought my father's idea and this church's idea of what God is just doesn't make sense. How can only 5% of the world be admitted into heaven under these laws? Why is it that they're largely wealthy white people are the only people sort of heading there? Why aren't the Buddhists going? Well, that's what started me to question. That's where the questions. This just doesn't make logical sense to me. Why? There's too many questions unanswered, and every time you put forward, when I was 15, say, or 16, every time I put forward the question, it would either come back to me as, well, the Bible says, or have faith. You just have to have faith. And so around about that age, I thought, it's not good enough for me. The idea of just have faith. If I have a question, I should feel sated. I do believe there is an element of faith to life. There's an element of God is unexplainable. It is a concept that you can't put into words. I mean, I think a really interesting idea to make a documentary and ask people what they think what God is, because I don't believe you can actually explain it. I mean, throughout the history of man, I wouldn't say I'm an expert. I've read quite a bit of Joseph Campbell, and he was the one who kind of has disseminated all these myths from all these cultures from all time. And whilst there's similarities, they're all stories to try and explain the inexplicable, because we want to have some grasp of who we are and where we stand, but no one can actually say it because it's beyond words. It's an experience. God is an experience. I Sorry, mate, I feel like you want to ask me questions. And
No,
I'll keep going.
I think you're making a lot of sense.
But I meditate. I was introduced to meditation about 15 years ago, and I meditate twice a day. And if I ever feel close to knowing what God is, it's somewhere in the boundary of that half-hour period, twice a day when I meditate. I think the basic idea of the meditation I do is to quieten the mind, to just let all that instrument calm down. And I sometimes have experiences where I feel a little out of body, a little time. Ideas of Hugh Jackman as a father, as an actor, all those roles we play just seem to melt away. And somewhere in there is where I have some glimmer, some glimpse at what God is. And it's a feeling. And it's blissful. And it can go like that, and every minute you try and grab onto it, it's gone. We're householders, right? You're a householder, I'm a householder. We're not people who are born to sit up on the top of a mountain and meditate. Some are, and they're incredibly powerful what they do. But you and I, basically, we have a job and we earn money to look after a family or whatever. We give to society in whichever way we can and contribute. It's what in Indian or Vedic terms they call the way of the householder. But twice a day, even as a householder, twice a day for half an hour, I can dip into what I call that gold, that the substance of what is God, and just bathe in it. It's a different experience every time, but I get glimpses of something that energizes me on such a deep level that I'm not sure exactly what I'd do without that form of prayer. It's a way to be in touch with who I really am. I did a film called The Fountain with Darren Aronofsky directed, and if you get a chance to look at it, it's his version of, I think, the meaning of life. And there was a truth in that, which is much of our life, our experience of this body, of being in this creation, is of duality. That in fact there is an interviewer, an interviewee. There is a man and a man, or a man-woman. There's night and day. There's pain. There's death. There's life, death, pain, pleasure. The world exists in this duality, but in fact, God exists beyond that, or the concept of God or truth is beyond those things. So, as a child, God was very much me wrapped up in good and evil, God and the devil. And for many years I thought everything that was good was God and that everything was bad was the devil. And I suppose now my understanding of it is that it's neither and both at the same time. There's something beyond that. There's something beyond... I'll try and think of very simple examples. I'm sitting here talking through this body to you, and the camera is seeing a form talking, and there is God within this whole entity and outside of it that exists beyond the words I'm saying, beyond the actions I'm using, beyond the space. There is something linking all of us. That to me is God. My training, I suppose, spiritually has gone from church to a place called the School of Practical Philosophy, where I've studied for many years. It's big in London. It emanated from London, and it's truly only about the search for truth, natural law, and how to live your life, basically, how to be happy. And through that, I've learned a lot of things, but the most potent examples I've had of that being connected beyond my physical form, or beyond to someone I love or know or hate, is in the theatre. And I've probably had 3 or 4 times where I've heard many actors describe it. It's almost a slightly out-of-body experience, but you can stand on stage with 2,000 strangers and feel like you know them intimately and they know you intimately, and feel completely safe that everything, you can open up your heart and they're opening their heart, and you're completely connected. It's in that instant a feeling of absolute privilege that you can experience it, and so powerful that it raises the hairs on the back of your neck, and you can't. Here's the frustrating thing about it: you can't make it happen. You can try your heart out. You can be the most dedicated actor of all time, and you can always do good shows. But of all the shows I've ever done, years of being on stage, probably only 3 or 4 times have I really felt it, and it's a pure blessing. And at the same time as you're there in it, it's this complete knowledge of unity, of community. If you're really listening, it's the space. It's the space between words. If you listen to great music, it's not always the music, it's sometimes the space. The greatest composers, I think, understood the space between the notes. And when you feel that, it's so uplifting. It's amazing. And we can get so focused on listening really hard and listening to the music that you forget. The experience of God is restful. It's, I feel, rejuvenating. I think modern day life, we often feel quite tired and quite run down. And that may be because we don't always observe to the laws of nature and laws of this body and how we should live our life. But I wrestle with this all the time. Is there a way that you can experience God when everything's crap in your life? Little things. I try and do this every day. I know you probably think I'm weird, but I will, at the end of a shower, always turn on cold as a little reminder that that's not going to affect who I am. The experience of being warm, pleasurable in a hot shower, it's just an idea that that's better than cold. Is it comfortable to have a really cold shower in winter? It's not comfortable. But why can't God exist in that uncomfortability? Why can't you be able to find rest in that? When I go to the gym or work out, you're signing up to have some moments where it's really uncomfortable and painful. And I think even as much as 6 months ago, I used to resent it. I used to, and I can't wait till it's over. But I thought, why am I wasting my life only wanting the pleasurable, only wanting the comfortable? Why work so hard just for that when you know that at best a quarter of your life is going to be pleasurable and comfortable? At best. A lot of life is uncomfortable. A lot of this experience it's not easy. It's not. I don't care who you are. It's not easy waking up first thing in the morning. You don't always want to get up out of bed. But can you find God in that? And I think that's where I'm at right now. I think to find that space. I've sort of got off the track from your question.
No,
but even in the pain or discomfort, or I don't want to do this, there should be some rest. And then, funnily enough, my experience is you can kind of enjoy it. It's weird. You can kind of enjoy the things which most people are not and shy away from. Fear is something that is, I think, the greatest disease of modern times. I mean, stress, people call it stress, but it's just fear. It's just as adults, it seems no one wants to say I'm scared. I'm scared that I'm not going to do well at my job. They go, I'm so stressed, I've got such a busy day, you know. But the fear stops you being able to rest. And lately I've been practicing this whole idea of just resting in the idea that I'm scared. You can't change it. You can't say to your mind, don't be scared. The worst thing, as you know, to a director, if you see someone you're interviewing is nervous, and you say to them, don't be nervous, it's going to do absolutely nothing. It'll probably make it worse. So it's best to kind of admit the human condition we have, and that it's not all roses, but still to be able to find rest in it. And I think that's God. I think God is somewhere in there. We all know the moment we get married and the joy of being married, that something's going to happen to that relationship. Either someone's going to die, it's going to break up, there's going to be pain. Equivalent to the attachment we have to it will be the pain from having that taken apart. And I suppose what I would love to be able to do, and what I'm working on, is being able to rest in the joy of it. And not that I've been through a breakup of marriage, but being able to rest in its destruction as well. Because that's not real, that's not God. None of those things are God. God exists in it somewhere. And the only way to experience it, from my being on stage or anything like that, sex, anything, the only way to really experience it is to find some rest in it. Find the space in it. And then everything enlarges.
What happens when you die, Hugh, do you think?
I've just been reading about it this morning.
Oh, somebody knows? Somebody wrote a book about it?
Yeah, it's called the Bhagavad Gita. And I was just reading it today. And I remember reading this thing, and it tells you what to do at that moment of death. And I remember thinking, oh man, this is like a fairy tale to me, because I've never actually faced a moment of prolonged knowing I was going to die, or thinking I was going to die. I haven't had that moment yet. But I have had a glimpse into what it will be like for me. I was researching this movie, The Fountain. I play a brain surgeon, so I was invited in to see some surgery. This woman, and just before we went in, the doctor told me that the woman was going to die. It was a recurrence of a tumour, and it was the size of he said almost the size of a tennis ball in her brain. He said, we're going to operate on it. And they kept her awake. It was the most extraordinary thing. They kept her awake so that they knew, as they're cutting into the tumour, whether they're cutting into speech parts of the brain or movement. So she was playing a kind of video game, lying down, the entire skull, the top half of the skull is off. And they're cutting in and they're asking her questions. She has to play this video game. But I've gone past the point. As she was wheeled in, I just had the information that she was going to die. And she had blonde hair. My wife has blonde hair. And for about a second, I almost was sick from the fear of thinking, what if that was her? And then I won't lie to you, then almost straight after that came the idea, what if it was me? And I was terrified, absolutely terrified. Because bottom line is, for all the work you might do in your life to prepare for that moment, I realised I was miles off it, miles off being ready. I mean, I think if I could aspire to anything, that great story about Socrates on his death, when he'd taken the poison, and the poison was going through his body, and he's explaining how it's going up his body, and he's starting to go numb in his feet, and his disciples, I suppose, for want of a better word, are crying, and he turned to him and says, why are you crying? I've prepared my whole life for this moment. And he was fine with it. He was absolutely fine. And in fact, quite calmly explaining what was going on in his body, because he wasn't attached to his life in the same way he wasn't attached to death. I think death, you said at the beginning of this interview, you said, I'm going to ask you a very simple question. What is God? And I think death is as simple as that. I think it's another moment. It's another moment that we live through. And my feeling is, whilst our attachment to the sensorial life, which is really our connection to this, it's really our only connection, real, to this creation, is what we perceive through the senses. That goes, that somehow the soul, or the God within you, kind of carries on. I don't know. Maybe it takes. I've read lots of different things. You go into some kind of waiting area. You take on another body. I mean, I grew up with the whole idea of heaven and hell, and there'll be judgment. And I think there probably I think there probably is, but I think it's just more simple, cause and effect. Whatever happens beyond death will be due to what's been going on in your mind at that moment of dying.
What about the concept of paradise being your life on earth now? What about the concept of hell
It's here.
being your life on earth now?
I totally... The revelation to me from that film I did, The Fountain, and I'd urge you to speak to Darren Aronofsky because he's an incredibly smart man and incredibly artistic. In the Bible, in Genesis, it talks about Adam and Eve being cast out, and the sword of truth, I think the flaming sword, which represents truth, is there to guard it. Because Adam and Eve eat from the garden of good and evil, they eat the tree of good and evil, and they eat the apple, so they understand duality for the first time. Up until then, there was no concept of good and evil, of the tree of knowledge. There wasn't any understanding of duality. There was only an understanding of unity, of God. So from that moment, all of a sudden, God and man are separate, man and woman are separate. Oh, I'm naked, you're naked. And I think that's where we are. And I think it may all sound too neat, but I truly believe there is a way to find the Garden of Eden here, in this life, wherever you are. You don't have to go to the top of a mountain to do it. I'm born in Sydney, and I think you can find it in a suburb of Sydney. I think it's totally your interpretation of life, the way you live it. I don't think it's easy, but I've read enough people who are fully self-realized, I suppose, have fully realized God within them and within life, where they are in the Garden of Eden. I think there's been some examples of it in history, and luckily they've written things down. And I fully believe that paradise is available. And I say that only because I feel like I've had a few moments of experiencing it. Sometimes in meditation, I've had a few moments on stage, some moments in relationships.
So paradise could be here on earth?
Yeah.
What about hell? What is your definition of hell?
The definition of hell that I was taught when I was younger is absence of God, which I remember thinking at the time when I was younger, I thought, no God, I don't know how bad that would be. I remember thinking, I don't know how you go from absence of that to flames and all of that, fire and brimstone. But I do now. I don't think you can be absent from God, because God is in everything. But I do think that you can get so far away from the laws of nature, that the experience of life is hell. It must be. I haven't done it or been close to doing it, but people take their life. I think they must be in hell, for there to be no other option than to end it, for it to be unbearable to that point. Then I believe that hell must exist. They must feel so absent from any feeling of peace, truth, bliss. Not only that they don't experience it now, but that they never will, that they end their life. There must be hell on earth. That must be the definition of hell. The mistake, I think, is to confuse heaven with sensorial pleasure. And I think most of our day, for a lot of people, and me included, is preoccupied with sensorially being happy, feeling good, working hard enough to have the things to enjoy, feeling comfortable in relationships, always everything happy and good. But I don't believe that is heaven on earth. My feeling of heaven on earth is always realizing that we are by nature truth, consciousness and bliss. That is actually our nature. It doesn't mean that you won't go through pain, or things might be uncomfortable, but somehow within painful or hard times, there can be an experience of bliss. Like we watch a play, we watch a tragedy and can love it. Why can't we love our own life when it seems tragic? What is that? Why does that stop? And it's obviously to do with attachment. You can watch a play and you can be crying watching it and absolutely love it. And yet, if it was your own life, it could be to the point where you want to kill yourself. And that's because you're attached to it. Whereas when you watch a play, you're not attached to it. You just fully can enjoy the fullness of being human, the human experience. You can enjoy it. I think for me that's hopefully the secret. Why is there so much fighting over religion? There's no question more important in life than who are we, why are we here, and what do I have to offer to the world. And some people, I believe out of fear that they might be wrong, can't accept someone else's opinion, can't be open to another idea. Sometimes, I think very rarely, people have a lot of power in that they can manipulate others, and they know that people's fears people are easily manipulated by fear, and some people do use that. But for the day-to-day person, they so want to be right in their choice and are basically not sure, which I think all of us aren't 100% sure, that they refuse to believe anyone else, and it offends them to the point where, I don't know, they want to kill each other. I can't see, if you put Buddha, Jesus Christ, Socrates, Shakespeare, Arjuna, Krishna at a dinner table together, I can't see them having any argument. That's the way I look at it. All the things they have to say seem to have a commonality. They're born out of different times, out of different situations, different cultures, but essentially it seems to me to be the same thing. Sometimes, I told you I was brought up by a father who ended up getting into almost missionary work in China, and the church I was at supported missionaries, and I remember thinking how great these people were to go and spread. In fact, it says in the Bible, you must go and spread this. It's your duty to spread this, tell the people. So they will go through incredible hardships. Some are killed, and through the years many have been killed. They've also gone and shoved it down people's throats. And they've done it out of feeling they were right to do that. I'm really sure of it. I'm sure missionaries always feel that they were right. I mean, we can look back in history now at what some missionaries and what churches did and through Africa and out here in the outback of Australia, you know. That just seems so, in a religious sense, imperialistic, incredibly imperialistic and aggressive. But I'm sure they felt they were doing the right thing. They were doing their duty. I think a lot of things get caught up in the organisation of religion. A lot is at stake, money and position in people's lives. And I read that book, Siddhartha, when I was 19, and it had such a profound effect on me, because here was a guy who was brought up the son of the king, and he had he did everything. All the rites and religious ceremonies, and he was brought up spiritually with the greatest knowledge, and he realized he had to go out and experience it and find it for himself, that truth for himself. And then finally he comes across the Gautama Buddha, who's this amazing Buddha, and becomes a disciple. And he kind of knows that this man is a fully realized man, but inside of him, after a little while, he says, I've got to leave that. I've got to go and find my truth. That is something that organised religion doesn't ever seem to have space for. The great Zen story of the bishop of something going to meet one of the Zen masters, and he comes up there to ask him questions, and he grants him, and he wants to go and talk to him, and he's filling his cup of tea, and as he fills his cup of tea, the bishop of whatever is watching, and it fills and gradually starts to overflow, and he's not sure whether to say anything, and it's overflowing, he's spilling everything, and he finally says, the cup is full. And he says, this is an illustration, the cup is like your mind. I won't answer any of your questions because your mind is full and you're not able to hear anything. You know, and I think a lot of religion is like that.
Yeah.
They might want to ask questions, but it's all from that, you're wrong, I'm right, because it's not really there's no spirit of finding space. God is us and is not us. It's inside you and me and is outside of you and me. It is everything. I struggle with the concept. I understand the concept that everything around us is an illusion. I struggle with that because it feels really real to me, and the pain and the thoughts and the mind feels incredibly real. But I think I get a glimpse of what that is. Scientifically, microscopically, we can look so close to see there is movement that I can't see movement now, and your body looks incredibly real. But there is movement, but I just think the truth is that God, consciousness, is what binds all of this together, everything. And really, through all our ideas, it's quite simply, what a gift this creation is. Everything about it. Whether it be times where you're hurting, or this human experience is amazing. It is here to be enjoyed. Not just the happy times, but even somehow the sad times are here to be experienced and fully experienced. And I think this creation has been given us to enjoy. And I think that if we do, that's probably about as close to God as we can get. I mean, I'm fascinated at the end of this to see what you come up with as a filmmaker, asking people whether that experience of what God is there. And I've spoken to some incredibly wise people, and sometimes the wisest of them said to me, you know, no matter what we talk about, don't hold on to it, just let the sound of my voice, just listen to the sound. And somewhere in the sound is the truth. And we're so trained from being this high to go for meaning, to analyze, to find truth, to work it out, pros and cons. And I think as we meddle, somehow that truth goes. Oh my God. What a place to ask these questions too. The Aboriginal people, I've read a lot and I'm speaking to them, and they see what they call the magic. They see it in everything. They see the magic. And I suppose that's what I mean by is God. God is us. You, me, the land, the creek, the interplay of so many different things that have to make this creation work is it's magical, it's wondrous.